Today we are going to look at trigger. Now, when we say trigger is any SQL statement that initiates or executes or displays a message whenever something happens in the database or whenever there is any action performed in the database. So here, what we are going to do is that you can create, we have what we call the instead of trigger, we have after, and then we have before, right? Now you can also create a trigger to prevent some certain action. So what we are going to do is that with this trigger that we are going to create, this is going to prevent um, users from deleting records from the employees table, right? So if you want to delete a record, it should prevent, right? And that is the use of the trigger. So quick one, this is how we are going to do it. So we are going to create a trigger. So we go create trigger, then the name of the trigger, let's say T underscore trick on the table called employees for delete. Then go begin, you type print record deletion not allowed. So that message you will decide to put in the message, right? You will decide to put in the message. Then you go roll back transaction return, then you end like this. So this trigger that we are going to create, this is to ensure that whenever someone performs any delete against the employees table in the main database, it should prevent and then provide this resource as record deletion not allowed. You can use in a situation like this, if you want to prevent people from deleting records from your deleting or updating, you can use the trigger to enforce that or to check all these things. So let's highlight and then execute. So when we execute, the result is going to be commands completed successfully. Now once it is done, now let's try to delete. So we go delete from the table called employees. Now when you highlight, then you execute. Now look, the results here is what? Record deletion not allowed. So the trigger is performing the action for us. You cannot delete any record. So if you want to be able to delete record, then you need to disable the trigger. So here it says disabling the trigger. So to disable the trigger, you go disable trigger. Then the name of the trigger is T trig on the name of the table, which is employees, like this. So this is how we disable. When we say disable means it's the trigger is there, but it wouldn't be active. That's the meaning of disable. That means it is still in existence, but it will not be active. So let's execute this, and then it will tell us completed successfully. Now we will try to delete just one record from the table and let's see. So delete from employees where employee ID is equal to, I think we have 5, right? It's equal to 5. So it says one row deleted. You see, it's working. Now, how do we enable the trigger? So enabling a trigger. So if you want to enable the trigger, that's the opposite of the first one. So enable trigger, then the name of the trigger, trig, and go on employees. So this means that you want the trigger to start working. So it's there, but it will now be active. Now let me try to delete for record number 4 and let's see. You see, it wouldn't work because the trigger is in action. It says record deletion not allowed. Good. Now let us delete the trigger, that is dropping the trigger. So to drop the trigger, you go drop trigger, then the name of the trigger is T_trig, like this. Then we highlight the code, then we execute. So that this one simply means that you have cleared the trigger from the system. This is not disabling, it is deleted from the system, right? That is how to delete the trigger. Now let's look at the instead of trigger. So instead of, now when we say instead of trigger, the instead of simply means, let's say when the person wants to perform a delete, right? When a person wants to perform delete on the employees table, it shouldn't perform delete, but it should rather perform a select statement. That is the instead of. So instead of performing a specific execution, it should perform a different one. That is the instead of. So here we go create trigger, then the name of the trigger is app. Let's make it INSSEL. That's the trigger, right? On employees. Instead of delete, right? You should perform select star from employees. And let's see, I think let me remove this thing. So instead of delete, it should perform a select star from employees, right? So here we are going to execute this command and see. So the trigger is created. Now let's try to delete a record and let's see. So delete from employees where employee ID equal to 4. Now when you highlight and execute, you see, instead of performing the delete, it's rather displaying what? The records. So that is the use of the instead of. Now let's drop. So drop trigger. The name of the trigger is INSSEL. So that is the trigger and then the instead of trigger. In the next video we'll look at the before and then the after trigger. Then we'll look at sequence.